Morning-ish, everyone. Excuse the horrible, no-face, weird. Gonna work on that. More details on that in a future video. Might be kind of fun. But today's vlog, I'm not sure what it's really about. I'll probably have this vlog come out, I don't know, after all of the Fast 5 videos are done. Sorry, you guys can't see me. My infant is in the other room, and so I'm on dad duty today. But tonight, when I'm also on dad duty, but she'll be mostly sleeping, and everyone else is asleep because I don't know when I'm out of breath. I don't know when the missus is gonna get back, along with the other kiddo. And I would like to get my editing done for my book before I get started on Fast and Furious 6, because I captured the movie. It's good to go, I just haven't recorded my commentary on it yet. And before I get started on that, I need to go over the edits my editor did on my book and see what there is to do there, and then allow her to do the next stage of the process, because I've been putting that off. I've been busy. I overestimated how much I could get done with a newborn and a 2-year-old and a wife and a dog and all kinds of other things. The M3 didn't pass emissions. I could look into making sure it can, or I can just wait. It doesn't really, it's not that important. And just make sure all the fluids are all still going. Man, silhouette vibes. No big deal, because eventually we might just go to Washington or something where emissions isn't really necessary for registering a vehicle, so I don't need to worry about fixing anything, because the air is so damn clean there. But we're still kind of looking into that and how all that would work. I know that's probably news to you guys, but yeah, I'm gonna go on dad duty, as I had been for the last few months, and because I've been on paternity leave, and I'll get to work on the book tonight.
Now to turn on the dirtiest laptop in the world.
I don't know why I'm doing that accent, but it is now 9:31 in the afternoon. I've got either a few minutes or a few hours before the infant wakes up. So I'm going to try and get started on editing my book. Okay, I've got an editorial letter here I'm going to read from my editor. Her name's Sarah. I found her on readsy.com. She's been really helpful and really cool and enthusiastic, and she seems pretty professional. Editing, so far the whole package has cost about $4,000. Well, I've got a final payment coming up on the 28th for $3,200. But I need to do my end of the deal and review the edits and things and comments, and then she'll be able to do the, I think, the final passive edits, where it makes everything a bit more refined and better looking. So, I'm going to try and not feel too... I'm really nervous about reading these comments, because it's not like YouTube, right? YouTube is one of those things where it's like, I encourage the comments. I'm very, enthusiastic about it, and I'm really excited to hear back from you guys. It's like a social thing. Whereas with a book, it's like, I'm putting a lot of myself in this book. I care a lot about it. You know, I've been trying to figure out how to tell this story for a little over a decade now, because I first had the idea when I was a kid, but it's kind of, it's completely unrecognizable to when I first had the idea, with like a couple core themes. And so it's very important to me, and it's been growing as I've grown, and now I'm trying to actually get it out there. And it's a little nerve-wracking, because it's like, please don't be terrible. I'm speaking to people that are credible about this. Never mind. I think the infant just woke up. I will read this letter later. I started to get into it, and I'm really pleased with what she said. I'll talk about it in the next clip. But I need to go on dad duty again. Okay. Go back to the top here. So I read a bit of it. I need to read the rest. Okay. Couple initial comments. It's fascinating to read such a complex story. Extremely intricate background and carefully crafted world building. One of my biggest concerns was world building, because I think a fictional universe needs a good world that you can be immersed into, and a good way to test that, in my opinion, is to be able to say, okay, I'm going to imagine myself living some kind of daily life or routine within this universe, or going out and trying to do my own adventure within that universe, and seeing if that can be reasonably imagined. With the rules and expectations set up by the original author, and then seeing that if there's any gaps, that you can fill them in yourself with the established rules and patterns, and think, okay, yeah, I can immerse myself into this universe. I can, you know, internally role play myself into that universe, and that's I think that's a sign of a good universe, especially if you already have the initial interest to be in said universe. I gave the reader powerful motivation with the early... Okay, so stuff happens early on in the story that I guess is a good way to hook interest of the readers early on. That was kind of the intention. Hopefully it doesn't feel cheap to most people, because I know some stories have done it before. It was actually inspired by a couple things, but that's cool to me that some of my intentions and some of my concerns are already kind of like, okay, things might be working out here. The main character, I'm not going to say anyone's names, I'm paraphrasing a lot here, given us such a layered central figure in this character. Of course, you feel for him when he experiences loss, but then he becomes such a twisted character that the reader is often unsure whether to root for him or against him. Definitely somewhat of an anti-hero. Now, I know anti-heroes these days might be a bit overused, and I am kind of a product of the anti-hero, edgy edgelord era, but I'm trying to do my own kind of fresh take on that and make it where it's not exhausting and that it's still interesting, because I know not every villain needs to be relatable and every villain needs to be tragic and understandable, and so I've tried to make this character one where you can go, I can see where you're coming from, but I cannot relate to you at all. Sort of thing. And I like the idea of there being a running theme, and this was intentional, of having it be where, who are actually the real good guys? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? Who should I be rooting for? And eventually you just go, I gotta pick a team, and hopefully that works out. Because that's kind of how real life is, whether it's with sports, politics, or, I don't know, watching the Family Feud down the street. So, I've got to go through it. I'm going to read all the comments. Overall strengths. Oh, she says, in regards to this letter, I will break a lot of my comments on the manuscript into subcategories. Some of these will bleed into each other. What do you consider the themes of this story? It's a revenge story. Yeah, it's definitely a revenge story. So, one of the things is, for the main character, he is dealing with self-discovery and self-acceptance and an endless quest for knowledge. It's true. Additionally, it deals with trust, loyalty, and the subjective nature of power. It's really interesting hearing someone, this is like the main thing that I was taught as a student. Critical analysis and kind of describing what you're reading and getting to the bottom of it. You know, it's kind of the whole thing of, well, what do you think Shakespeare meant? Not that I'm going to compare myself to Shakespeare. But it's interesting to hear someone do kind of what you'd expect a lot of students in an English class to do. To be like, okay, well, let's get to the bottom of what this might be about. Uh-oh. My other child needs milk. Consistency of voice and tone. For the most part, I can get a sense of your voice as a writer, and it remains consistent throughout. The tone fits the actions and events. Interesting. That's reassuring. So because this is my first big kind of book, I don't want to call myself a writer yet until I've really kind of squared this up, published it, and seen if it was actually successful before I say I'm a writer. Because otherwise I could have been saying I'm a writer for the last 10 years without ever publishing anything or finishing anything. I don't want to be a Brian Griffin, if that makes sense. But one of the concerns I always have is because it takes so long to write a book when you're not just a full-time writer, is that you take sometimes long breaks in between. And so you worry that you might forget certain details, you might start writing the book differently, because I don't know if I have a certain writing style, because I don't really share what I write with people. So that's kind of interesting, that I am being told I am consistent. Depth of knowledge. Okay, I wasn't expecting this. I guess she's talking about herself. Having no advanced background in science fields, I have no tools to draw the line between where your story transitions from fact to fiction, which is amazing. In other words, you're absolutely convincing a general reader that you know enough about black holes and wormholes and physics to persuade us to believe that these events are logical in the fictional world you've created. I'm excited to hear more about you and your background and research in these areas. So I'm writing a science fiction book. I've written it. And the core premise, the epiphany I had when I realized I need to write this story, I just had an idea. I pitched it to one person that said, that's cool, you need to do it. And it's stuck with me ever since, is that energy is a currency, which I think most scientists will agree that is a currency, more or less. There might be better ways to describe it. that the universe works on, and that you give and receive results based on the energy you put into systems and take out and all that sort of stuff. And so I thought, okay, well, I like science fiction. How can we give that a science fiction or maybe a fantasy twist and say, okay, what if we had people that could manipulate energy, like one of the fundamental forces of the universe, and then play with that and see how we can creatively put limitations on it? How does that work? What are the implications? What are the limits? Like, is it just kind of like a Green Lantern's ring, where it's kind of, if you're creative enough, you can do anything? And then I go, okay, but then why stop at energy? How can you be creative with the manipulation of matter, of space, of time, and what other things that lurk, that lay in between the lines when you start researching physics at either atomic levels, molecular levels, quantum. I know a lot of people overuse, I talk about quantum physics. And so that's kind of like, I don't want to talk about that too much. And just see what cool systems are there that a superhero or a kind of a race of superheroes could manipulate. And so that's kind of the cool kind of sci-fi aspect of it. But then it's also about the people too. This is kind of an added bonus to have the cool powers. There is certainly no shortage of action throughout. This is true. With a book of this length, there's a danger of getting lost in the sheer amount of words, but your story has constant motion to keep the reader moving forward, looking forward to those resolutions that they are hoping for, and curious to see what crazy things the main character will do next. That's also reassuring, I'm going to be honest. Well, we're in the overall strengths section. Overall strengths section, fair enough. So these are all the good parts. We're starting with the good. Yeah, the parts that you imagine for me as a writer is never the parts in between the action or the significant moments. Like, for instance, a main character appears, a main character dies, a significant betrayal, or a big fight, or an argument, or whatever, or like a speech. The scenes in between are the hardest things for me, because I go, ugh, okay, I need to make sure I have these periods where characters can rest and the reader can rest and process what just happened along with the characters, and then we move on to the next thing. Tense. Oh, like writing tense. For the most part, the book is written in present tense. Although challenging, I think you handled it well, and I saw a few times when you slipped into past tense. Yeah, that was one of my main concerns, is that I don't pay attention to what tense I'm writing in, and I just will go, oh, let's do first person, present, past, let's invent a new one right here and now. Yeah, no, that's definitely a problem that I have. The depth of your imagination, mic drop. Okay, without getting too much of an ego boost, let's go to areas to consider. In your request, you listed young adult as your target market, but I'm not as sure. The violence is pretty graphic and the scientific concepts are fairly advanced. I definitely think it's right on the line, but for me, it's more towards adult than young adult. Okay, I mean, that's not a big problem for me. I wasn't sure where to place it. Loose ends are definitely a concern. Yes, I kind of forgot about a few characters throughout the story. Like, there was kind of B and C stories about unfaithful romantic partners that I never really built off of, that I really wanted to include, but might just be a little unnecessary. I'm not sure. It doesn't really add to the story. Originally it was just to make the character more tragic, but it might not be necessary, per se. I might change that up. I really wanted to include that for some reason. I'm not sure. Maybe it's just because of my own experiences. The main character not being consistently identified with one specific name. Again, I'm paraphrasing. This is not what she's saying. My editor, who's Sarah, I don't know if I introduced her earlier. It's been like 5 hours since I last spoke to you guys, because keeping the infant asleep. And also I fell asleep. And it's really hard to get stuff done. Yeah. So I have this running theme where the main character, you first think he's like, almost like a weird superpowered Batman, where he's taken on this new identity and he has this new name he goes by. But then it's actually, he's just transitioned to becoming this other person because he's lost his previous identity and that he's just become this new one. And then his old name is just what he used whenever he's walking around, not in a mask. Not that he's hiding it, just no one knows and no one can figure it out and he doesn't care. But then I have this running theme where his best friend still calls him by his original name and almost always refuses to call him by his new name. And I guess I didn't quite execute that properly and it wasn't clear as to why I was doing that, which makes sense. I was concerned about dialogue and dialogue tags. Dialogue tags are easy enough to adjust. The rule of thumb is that all you need are says and asks for present tense. No need for Sally guffaws or Albert coughs or Trudy bellows. Yeah, that's the thing, is that I always, when I'm writing dialogue and I just have two characters going back and forth, it's always like, he says, he asks, and it's like, well, should I spice it up? It feels very kind of dry or boring or unchanging, but then it's like, I don't think people are really focusing on that. I think people are focusing more on what's being said by the characters, I guess. But it's like, I don't want to be criticized for my lack of originality and creativity. In addition, I always advise limiting the use of adverbs. For example, that was the most disgusting thing I've ever seen. Betsy says queasily. Do we really need the queasily? Or does the dialogue already tell us enough about how Betsy is feeling about the disgusting thing? Okay. I don't recall this being much of an issue in your manuscript, but it's something to keep an eye out for during revisions. I feel like I'm learning something, actually, here, you guys. As a dropout English major, when I really should have been a creative writing major, I feel like I'm actually learning something. Also that I'm paying attention, for one thing. And I spent $3,200 on this, so I'm definitely going to pay attention. Of my own money, I should say. What is your main concern regarding the dialogue? For the most part, I found your dialogue really accessible. My main advice would be to read every word, especially every word of dialogue, out loud. That makes sense. People have told me that before. I don't like doing it, but it makes sense. If it sounds odd reading out loud, then consider whether it's authentic to your characters. Would they actually say those things? Would anyone? I think I noted a couple places where I was distracted by that, but overall I thought it was strong. Pay attention to a character's son, who's like, what? I think he's like a 7 or an 8-year-old kid. I have a tendency to try and make characters sound intelligent for some reason, and I have to kind of avoid doing that. And I think a lot of people have that problem, because when you're writing, you can really kind of plan out what someone's going to say. It's like practicing an argument in front of a mirror. You're suddenly more intelligent and more eloquent. And so when you have all these characters interacting with each other, you get them to use big words and be smart with their arguments, and people listen to each other, and it's not just like how the real world actually is. And I've got this kid, and I think what she's saying is that the kid speaks far too intelligently for their age range. Which I believe. I will not deny that that's definitely something I would do. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I've written this. Changes perspective too often. So the main things I want to discuss with you, it's great you already have a sense of it. The book starts in on first person, then we switch to third person, limited mainly focused on another character. After that, you stay with third person, but you go back and forth to who is focusing. So we need to clean that up. My first piece of advice would be to change the beginning of the book completely from first person to third person. It's just too odd to start in first person and then switch to start. Okay, and so the whole reason why I did that is because I wanted to make it sound like the person telling the story was speaking directly to the reader. Like, you're at a campfire and you're going to say, I'm going to tell you the creepiest f***ing story I've ever told you, and you're going to have nightmares and shit yourself. But I might have done that a little clunkily. You know, switching tenses can be very, very f***ing weird and jarring to even like a general casual reader. Second piece of advice would be to decide a couple things. Is one person the main character or the other, or is it both? It's recommended that you decide. There's no right answer. I see. Because when we have one scene, and we go inside someone's head, it's only that one person for that scene. If they're both the main characters, then you can alternate from scene to scene. Okay, so you just have a clear point of view. We don't want to go inside the minds of multiple people within the same scene. Sure, that's a bit too muddy and a bit too omnipotent. Missing descriptive detail about characters in the world. Yes, I would agree. Sometimes when I'm writing, I'm in such a hurry to get my plot or action ideas out that I don't stop to add these necessary details, and it takes something away from the story. Some of the characters have done a great job. In the initial scene, we get a sense of two characters. I gave a really clear picture. Interesting. I unintentionally gave one character, which is fine, a very clear image. Another character, yeah, sure. And when I describe a villain, I'm good at describing stuff when I put my mind to it. It sounds like it's a huge cast of characters, and in order to care about each one, whether we care to like them or care to hate them, we need a little more. We need more on one person, motivations, background.
The cast of villains is so huge, you get them mixed up. Yeah, I do have a lot of people running around. That's an interesting point. I started making a list of characters. I'm right around 50. Whoops. That was not my intention. That is probably way too many characters. Okay. Yeah, well, that was the whole thing, that I was trying to do world building, but I was doing it by introducing characters from different cultures and groups, and that was my version of world building. That makes sense. This is a book in a series. She's recommending I might split it up, just to allow for a chance for more world building and more detail. Explain how they're on the planet they're on, because it's a planet based in our solar system, but obviously there's no reason people should be able to live on that based on our current understanding of how everything works, at least as of right now. Sure, okay. Yeah, it was hard to tell where people were because people were doing large anime-style attacks and couldn't tell if they were flying or on the ground. That's fair. I'm paraphrasing again. She's more eloquent about it. At each scene, the reader needs the who, what, where, when, and how. Oh, and why. I don't know why I skipped over why. For example, in the arena scene, there's an attack of some kind that is a mile long, and I didn't understand how that didn't consume the entire arena. Okay, so I'm kind of doing, this is hilarious, I'm doing kind of the Fast franchise thing, where I've got huge scale and a lot of characters, and I need to kind of boil it down. Over, under explanation, there's a lot of technical stuff I put in there, a lot of scientific technical stuff, and I've got no scientific background. This is from reading scientific literature, watching presentations, speaking to people in the field, in the fields of expertise that I need to speak to get an understanding of what I'm writing about so that it's accurate enough that I know how to play by the rules or break them however I see fit. And I was concerned that I was either going to over-explain or under-explain stuff. From her perspective, there was zero over-explaining. I would definitely rest in the under-explaining column. I think she's saying I under-explained. So I think she's encouraging me to actually better explain things either through metaphors or just saying it like it is, which I don't have a problem with. An example is nuclear pasta. So many concepts not familiar with. And when I combine those with fictional elements, it was easy to get lost. An example is nuclear pasta, which is a theoretical, as far as I understand, a theoretical state of matter that occurs in the core of a neutron star and is the theorized strongest material in the universe. So obviously I was like, I need to include that somehow. Strongest material in the universe? Heck yeah, why not? Run-on sentences? It's been a weakness for me in the past. Honestly, this isn't something I noticed a major issue. However, I would definitely keep an eye out for that in the copy editing stage. There's much more of a line level issue, but something you can keep an eye out for during your revisions. Every time a new speaker is speaking, it needs to begin a new paragraph. I started making these changes as I went, I noticed, but there's still a lot more to do to fix this and clean it up. In some cases, it wasn't as simple as starting a new paragraph because you had two speakers sharing a sentence. Really? It does sound like something I would do. Every time a new speaker is speaking, needs to begin a new paragraph. Why do I not know that? Was I not taught that, or was I not paying attention? I'm not going to pretend I was the greatest student in high school or college. Obviously not in college, I dropped out, but I graduated from high school. I think I should have taken a break before I went to school, though. University. I wasn't in the right mindset. There are many places where I wasn't sure who was speaking. We don't need a dialogue tag every time someone speaks, as long as we easily know from context who is speaking. Yeah, so that's the thing, is I'm afraid of doing dialogue tags, weirdly, so then we don't know who the heck is talking. Stylistic elements will be addressed during the copy editing stage, but you may also want to consider while you're revising, keeping out for typos, repeated words, tabs, instead of a first line indent. Double spaces between... Oh, Jesus. Oh, no. I only have my ex to blame for that one. Double spaces between sentences. She told me that was the correct thing to do, or was like the fancy thing to do. And my editor's going, why is he doing this? Why are you doing so many double spaces between sentences? Anything else that you've noticed I marked on the first read-through earlier? We catch these, the easier it is. prevent them from getting into the final draft. Transitions. Consider some ways you can vary your transitions between scenes. We can use a symbol for section breaks, which can help alleviate some of the redundant phrase. Look for, okay, transitions. Consider some ways you can vary your transitions between scenes, okay? Kind of like dialogue tags, just a bit bigger. We can use a symbol for section breaks, which help alleviate some of the redundant phrasing that we usually think of for transitions. Look for repeated verbiage like meanwhile or back at thee. And it's kind of like that whole thing of sort of language you'd use when you're trying to get to a minimum word count on an essay. You know, that sort of stuff, that sort of language. If you provide a break, either with spacing or a symbol, you don't necessarily... Holy shit, 3:30 a.m. There are so many... it is, by the way. Writing a book at 3 a.m. Editing a book. A lot of viral videos happen at 3 a.m. There are so many epic battles and scenes throughout, but what do you consider to be the true climax of the book? Is it coming at the right time? Have we steadily built to it throughout? I know what I consider to be the climax throughout the book. It's not a big final battle. It's not... There's an important speech that throughout the whole time I was trying to write this book and kind of picture it in my head, that there was this speech I wanted the main character to build up to and plan for and kind of arrange and then execute it perfectly, dramatically, theatrically, and have that be the moment that you go, the character has achieved at least the first stage of what they want to achieve within this book or in this series, his story. And then that's kind of it for now until the next book. Everything else is kind of building to it because he's trying to figure out, he's powerful. What does he do with his power? He's angry. He wants revenge. And then what does he want to do with this new life he has? What purpose does he have? So his decision on what he wants to do becomes clear in that speech to either the reader or the characters. It's kind of a little bit of both because he's a very deceptive person. So he's not upfront about everything. There's a lot of epic battles. I would say the battles are also kind of transitory things where the climax isn't happening within a battle, it's happening within a speech. The ending feels abrupt. I know all too well that feeling of wanting to be done. You see the finish line, it's right there. I believe that. You need to give the ending of your book some thought. The same thought and care that you've given the rest of the book. Doesn't need to drag on forever after the climax is hit, but we need to be able to take a breath, take stock of, oh my god, take stock of what has happened, grasp the nugget of what's coming up in the next book, and then sign off. Okay, I'm going to go through the book now. She said she's got comments and things and all that sort of stuff. I'm going to try and make all these edits and things like that. Pay attention to her suggestions. Okay, I'm excited to get into this. I'm actually really excited. I hate giving my writing to other people. That's why I haven't given it to you guys. That's why I haven't even given you any of the details of my book until kind of now. I've just kind of said, I'm writing. You don't know anything about it. It is genuinely something I care about and I'm very passionate about. I've only ever wanted to do 3 things in my life from almost the very beginning. Is have cool cars, tell stories in a medium that I can understand and do relatively well, and have a YouTube channel. I kind of figured out these 3 things at different stages of my life, but those are my 3 core goals, which shouldn't surprise you once you realize I was born in 1998, especially with the YouTube thing. She makes comments of her reactions as she's reading, so she might ask questions and I might answer them later on. That'd be cool. This is going to be really valuable, so I'm excited. Well, I'm going to get to work on that if I can. My infant is still over there sleeping. Thank you guys for watching. This has probably gone on for a very long time. It took me about 35 minutes to read this kind of editorial letter. Now I'm just going to go through the actual book, not talking to you guys, because the talking part makes us take longer. And hopefully I can get this done, because then I can work on Fast and Furious 6. But I'd like to get this done so I can allow my editor to get on to the next stage and not take forever and have to push the deadline date back multiple times, you know? So thank you guys so much for watching. It's 3:30, so hopefully I can get some stuff done. In the meantime, take it easy, everyone. Stay legendary. Stay tuned for this if you're interested. And love you. Bye-bye.